You are on Real Talk for Real Men, and we are grateful that you are here. Well, this is a very exciting time to be a believer and to be a man. You're listening to Real Talk for Real Men. I am Pastor Tremaine Forbes, and with me I have,
Pastor Dan Lawson, United Gospel Outreach Church, Kinston.
and also I have.
Elder Nat Farrow.
All right, well, we're moving right along. Today we're going to talk about grief. It is for certain one thing that if you are alive, you're gonna have a time where you're gonna have to deal with grief one way or the other. All of us have to deal with it differently. Um, you know, grieving is such a tough thing, just to have to cope. Um, Webster defines grieving as deep sorrow, especially that's caused by someone's death. We have to overcome grief, seems like sometimes, and then trouble or annoyance. We were too tired to cause any grief, but we're talking more or less about the deep sorrow that comes with losing a loved one. Now, truthfully, um, when it comes to grief, there are more ways that you can grieve. Sometimes you can grieve a business. Some people have grieved losing a dog. I remember I had several dogs, but I think I really was at a special age when I lost my dog I had named Champion, and that was tough on me as a child. But you can have grief over losing an ideal or a dream, or sometimes we have to reformulate who we are when we grieve, because if you had like a desire to do something, maybe it might be an athlete that really wanted to have a high level sports career and maybe tear a hamstring or do something that, break a particular bone or do something that take them out where they can't perform on the level that they were performing before. Even at certain, you have the dream job, and maybe you might can't even get into the dream job. I know a young man that wanted to be in a particular field, and he talked about it ever since he was a kid. I was a youth pastor, and then I guess he gathered that he didn't have at the particular time the know-how how to do that particular job. He just kind of was thrown into a field of grief. But I told him, I said, look, if you can't do that, do something next to it. Get just as close as you can to what you want it to do. And did he do it? No, he did something totally different. But I think that he still there's a level of he's still having joy out of life. But sometimes we have to make adjustments when it comes to losing different things, and especially we have to make an adjustment when it comes to losing a loved one. What is a good definition of grief? Grief is a strong, sometimes overwhelming emotion for people, regardless of whether their sadness stems from the loss of a loved one or from a terminal diagnosis they or someone they love have received. They might find themselves feeling numb and removed from daily life, unable to carry on with regular duties while saddled with their sense of loss. Grief is a natural reaction to loss. Grief is both a universal and personal experience. Individual experiences of grief vary and are influenced by the nature of the loss. Some examples of loss include the death of a loved one, the ending of an important relationship, job loss, loss through theft, or loss through independence through disability. Sometimes we have lost things. Maybe you might lose a wedding band. I actually had a friend who was really traumatized because he lost his wedding band, and he kind of thought like the wedding band was magical. And I told him, I said, look, man, you lost it. But what you can do, just get another one.
A better one.
Yeah, get a better one. Now you got a little bit more money in your pocket. Now, I ain't talking about get a better wife. Oh, baby, it's gone. See you. We're going to find her. Well, go find me some happiness now. That was a sign from the Lord. No, we ain't talking about that. But how have any of y'all ever experienced grief, or how did you handle it?
Well, I've had some situations of loss where I went straight to acceptance. You know, everybody don't handle grief the same way. There are people that you know, when they encounter grief, they are emotional all the way through all of the different steps of grief. Um, and then there are some people, and a lot of times we call those people cold-hearted. They go
Is
straight
that
to
what you?
acceptance.
Wait. Are you? So you saying that you might
No,
be a little?
I don't think cold-hearted is. I don't think cold-hearted is a appropriate description for people that go straight to acceptance. You know, because there are some things that, you know, we pray the prayer. You know, Lord, give me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, and the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So if you encounter a grief that you know you can't do nothing about, there's no solution. It's happening. It's happened. You know, if you have the kind of temperament that you can go straight to acceptance, I think that's a good thing. And I've had some losses where I went straight to that. You lose a $20 bill, and you look for it for a while, and after a while you just say, you know what, it's gone. But I know that most grief goes much deeper than that. But I just use that for an example. So now there's also been some things that it took me time. It kept running. Oh, it's almost like a rewind in my mind. It keeps rewinding and starting over again, rewinding and starting over again. What could I have done? What should I have done? When my mom passed, it was that way. My sister called me and told me that she was taking my mom to the emergency room, and I told her, I said, I'm getting ready to come down. She said, no, you can wait till tomorrow. And when I got to the emergency room, my sister was coming out crying. My mom had passed. And man, that just keep playing over and over and over in my mind. Why didn't I get? It ain't like she would have lived if I had got down there sooner. But you always think those kind of things. So yeah, there are different kinds of grief, and you can handle. There's some that you can handle easy. There's some that's going to be real tough on you, and it's not the same for every person. And every situation is different. So that's been what grief has been about in my life.
Elder.
Yeah, I just think, it comes down to, I know we say it sounds cliche that everybody handles it differently, but that's true. And I was I was thinking about, a lot of us do go to mom, that's an important relationship. And I think a lot of it has to do also with the people around you. You know, I as a believer, I put God in it. I don't, I can talk about it without, but I put God in it. And a lot of times God has the people around you that help you to deal with the grief. You know what I'm saying? To deal with the issue, and I think about my mom, and I've expressed this before, that I had to go up to New Bern and not driving. I had a brother that took me. And when he said one thing to me that I believe God put in his heart. He said, today your mom is waking up with Jesus. And that I kind of rode on that word. You know what I'm saying? Throughout the process that I had to go through, because it changed the way the perspective that I had. I know she's going, I'm going to miss her from here, but I said, yeah, I know my mom. Yeah, she's doing good. And I rode that perspective throughout the process, the funeral, and so we need a perspective to to deal with the grief. And it was something I wanted to read, something I found that says this: grief is an emotion common to the human experience, and we witness the process of grief throughout the biblical narrative. Multiple Bible characters experience deep loss and sadness. And it goes on to name folk. But the thing is, when you're a believer, you can lean on the word, you can lean on God, and it kind of helps you deal with that, with what you're dealing with. But I would never say that to somebody who's grieving. You understand what I'm saying? Sometimes we can overspeak.
Yeah.
You've got to let them come to it, if that makes sense, because sometimes we say things when we don't need to say things. We just need to be there.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that kind of puts me in the mind of Job's friends. But now I'm gonna be honest. I could truly say they were friends because the Bible let us know they sat for a period quietly. But buddy, I don't know what was on their mind because, well, I guess I do know because they start talking. They're like, Job, we're gonna help you get this right.
Miserable comforters.
Yeah.
But can I say something in that?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm the way I look at that. Maybe I'm just not as hard on them as a lot of people are, because God didn't say that. That's what Job said about the miserable comforters. But the fact that they were there, and when you read the commentary, it sounds like how they talk to each other anyway. They were trying to figure out, all four of them were trying to figure out why this was happening. And so, I don't know, maybe I don't quite go that hard on them. I think when I read the scripture and you go to the end, God was telling them, what you said about me wasn't right. Not what you said about Job. It's what you said about me. I don't know. That's just my thought.
They actually tried to. There are some things that they said that gave the impression that they were trying to convince Job, you got to have done something wrong. You got to have sinned, because God is, God don't make mistakes.
Yeah, this ain't no God's fault.
And he wouldn't do this to you if you had done something wrong. And Job was saying, I didn't do anything wrong. And at the end, God did rebuke them. So I'm thinking that they were performing based on the knowledge that they had.
Right.
The great revelation that we get out of the whole Job situation, and I know we kind of cut you off from your point. So
No.
Is that even if you do everything right, because God did say, have you considered my servant Job, who doeth good and all that, and even if you do everything right, just like his son did, God still has the providence and the sovereignty to chasten you, to get you to humble yourself to his will. So the basic thing with Job was, Job, I want to use you for an example. I want to do this to you, and I want you to accept it.
And you know what? In the process of that, I think God allowed them to have that narrative so that when we're going through, going through, we can see, no, that ain't it. No, that ain't it. No, that's not it. No, that's not it. And then I think it was Eliphaz, he got real close to it. I think the youngest one, he kind of got close, but no cigar, as folk would say, or close, but not exactly where it was. And oftentimes, I don't know about y'all, but I have suffered things, and I have kind of I was Job friends on myself, and I said, Doc, you done messed up somewhere.
Yeah, you be trying to check off the bases, touch all the bases to make sure, what did I do?
The pain gets so it can get so rampant on top of you. We do know about the 5 stages of grief, and if you don't, we'll just run through it real quickly. There's denial. That's the part where you it helps us minimize the overwhelming pain of loss as we process the reality of our loss, we're also trying to survive emotional pain. It can be hard to believe we have lost an important person in our lives, especially when we just spoken with them the previous week or even the previous day. I do know I've had it where I've been a part of um, having a relative to die, and with the relatives, they tried to make it like the person pulled the cord on, or whatever you say it, pulled it on a person that was a good person, and they knew God would have healed them at that last minute. But that's not necessarily uh, the case, nor was it when I looked and saw that. They were kind of accusing one person that they all elected to be the person that make the hard decision. And I know I used to be the type of person that would say, hey, look, you don't never ever um you let God do it at the end. But once you start seeing people and they start to deteriorate and all the oxygen machine doing is just keeping the organs going, you start to have more compassion on people. Well, a lot of people don't know, but when you get into pastoral, there's two things that become very evident to you: life and death, because you're one of the first people call when they want a miracle to preserve life, but you also are one of the first people call when life is ended.
That's true.
And I mean, you pastors have to deal with death a whole lot. I've been talking to people. I mean, people. I've actually had pastors to call me because they had a loved one that was dying, and I don't know. They thought that, hey, I got a good idea. Pastor Forbes, can you ride down? I literally had to ride to another city to go see their loved one because the family could not. Once they were trying to say, give mama some more time, their mama some more time. And when I got there and I saw what I saw, I ain't gonna go into describing. And they said, do you think our mother is dead? Now, mind you, this is a pastor asking me to do this. The same somebody that's in my congregation. And I went down and I looked and I saw different little things. I said, yeah, I think your mom went on to glory. And then they formulated out something in the next few days to go down and deal with. But if you step in the pastoral, you're gonna see death a whole lot more than what you really want to see, and then have to comfort people in that situation. And two places you really want to see people act ugly sometimes. And I hate to tell you this in case y'all don't know, depending on how old you are, is at weddings. Sometimes you see the craziest things.
Yes.
God knows. And then at funerals.
Yes.
So, but grief can be kind of tough. I'm gonna let one of y'all grab it for 30 more seconds, and then we're gonna move.
Yeah, I agree. It can be tough, and it depends on the situation. There are some situations, even in trying to comfort people, because there's no one word that fits all or one phrase that fits all.
Mm-hmm.
So when you try to comfort people, it's dependent upon the situation. Every situation is not the same. And what a person faces in grief is not always the same. There are some people that do good if you leave them alone,
Yeah,
and others you don't want to leave them alone.
right.
So it's a complex discussion.
It really is. It really is.
Um,
Yes, Al, you want to say something?
well, I know there's no time. I'll catch it on the other side.
Okay. Well, on that note, we're talking about grief. If you lived any length or time, you know that it's part of the inevitable. That we're gonna lose something, and we have to deal with the consequences of the feelings of loss. And we got to be kind to each other as we see people lose. Sometimes when people are close to me, I memorize around about the time what they go through, so I can make sure that I calculate more mercy, more understanding. And on that, we're going to come back and talk about that on Real Talk for Real Men on 106.9 FM on your radio dial. We'll see you after this sponsorship break.
Lock down the Wi-Fi network for a ministry or church? Why is that necessary? Stay tuned.
The Legal Alert. Here's attorney David Gibbs Jr.
A few years back, offering Wi-Fi was still relatively rare, particularly in churches. That is not the case any longer. Many churches are willing to offer free wireless internet to their members and guests. While this can undoubtedly help attract visitors and appease members, it can absolutely bring potential legal problems as well that we see on a regular basis at the Christian Law Association. We have seen a church office raided by a SWAT team. That's correct. Raided by a SWAT team, a church. Why? Because it was discovered that a nefarious person was uploading illegal material through the church's free Wi-Fi. At the barest minimum, churches should password protect their Wi-Fi. Let me repeat that. At the barest minimum, be sure that your church is password protecting the Wi-Fi, and they should consider additional protections as well. The Wi-Fi is something that can be a great blessing. It can also bring great liabilities. Be sure yours is locked down and protected.
The Legal Alert is a presentation of this station and the Christian Law Association.
This is Awesome Radio, WBIS LP 106.9.
Surely in the family, God is with me. Surely in the family, God is with me. Surely in the family, God is with me.
Well, we're back on Real Talk for Real Men. Today we're dealing with different things pertaining to grief. And, sometimes, we wake up in the morning and we see different things we probably didn't see before. Like this morning we woke up to, there was a mass shooting, another mass shooting for children. And I think that when it first happened, we all were concerned, but now it's becoming a part of our daily norm here in the U.S. It's horrible. And then we have different things that's going on in the world. How do we help those and aid those that are going through grief? How are the different ways, gentlemen, do we help those that are going through grief? I like what you had said earlier, Pastor Lawson, that sometimes you have to let some people work through grief. There are grief groups, and I'm thinking about maybe after September, our church may be having a grief share group. I went on the internet, found one, and pretty much you can get the materials and just kind of lead through going through grief, the different cycles of grief, and helping people, those that are grieving, because oftentimes we don't talk about grief enough in church. A lot of us, that's stuff we don't want to hear about, and definitely in the young church, nobody wants to talk about things that you might go through and suffer. And I think sometimes we don't have good doctrine on suffering and how suffering fits into living. What do you say to that?
Well, you mentioned, grief counseling and grief agencies. Mm-hmm. The problem I have with those is that most of the time, these grief counselors, they're not spiritual. They don't see eternity. And when your grief is about the loss of a loved one, eternity is a major component of that. Understanding eternity, believing in eternity, believe that there is life, after death. These things are important. And most grief counselors are trained to avoid that discussion. They don't want to pick up on that. And even if they did, if they're not spiritual, if they're not converted themselves, then that becomes a very hard discussion for them to have. I know that when when I'm dealing with a family because they've lost a loved one, it is 100% different when that lost loved one is a person that's saved. You know, for the last 30 years, we've been calling funerals celebrations. And the thing is, we put it on every funeral program, whether the person knew God or not. You know, we're celebrating we're celebrating their life. And be honest with you, I find it very difficult to celebrate a life that has no evidence of any kind of salvation or relationship with the creator, the one that made that person. Now they're going back to meet that creator, and they don't show any evidence, or they haven't shown any evidence of having a relationship with the creator. So it's tough to counsel them because I can't say that they're in a better place if I don't know that. I'm never going to tell a family that your loved one is in a better place unless I really sincerely believe that they are. And that's going to be based on what I knew about them before they passed. So grief counseling is complex. It's tough. It's not the same for every occasion, but it's something that's greatly needed because people really need somebody to be there. Elder said earlier, you know, sometimes it's about being there, not necessarily saying something, and I think that's very important because sometimes that's what I do. I be there, and I don't, you know, necessarily have a whole lot to say. So I'm gonna kick it back to Elder now.
Well, one of the things I think the celebration comes from our past as African Americans through the African, you know, and it comes through different other religions and the way people see. Okay, so yeah, I understand your point of the difficulty of kind of getting into that because that's a cultural thing, I think. The other thing is, as far as the grieving part, I think there's so much difference between the relationship that the person has with the person that's gone. That kind of, I think, tempers the level of grief or the type of grief. What your relationship was, whether you were close, whether there was problems, you know, so all of that comes into play, I think, when it comes to the, you know, how you deal with it. And then your personal perspective, you know, different people, I have different people deal with it differently. We know that, but I'll tell you, it's something that each person has to come to terms with. And I believe God doesn't put anything on you.
We've got a caller, Elder. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you can pick right back up after this. Caller, welcome to Real Talk for Real Men. You're on the air.
Yes, sir. Good morning, distinguished gentlemen, panelists, and brothers and sisters in Christ, man. I love y'all to life. I cannot say how proud I am to hear practical, hands-on. It had to be God just said, "Hey, get to that podcast or this show immediately because there's something I want to show you." And I see black men. I'm using the word black men, Afrocentric, for a reason. Doing what we haven't done in the past 100 years. We've had no time to tend to ourselves psychologically and physically. We work all the time. We sleep 8 hours. We work 8 hours. We got to try to eat an hour or two out of that. Ain't got time to pay attention to trauma in our lives. And losing a loved one is one of those things. Somebody going to jail is one of those things. Somebody getting murdered is one of those things. And grief, losing a child, having a miscarriage, and grief is about attending to our psychological position in life. I love you guys for it. I love going to church. I'm more spiritual than I am religion. But when I hear this, Pastor Trey, if you get that group going, I'm in, brother. Because we got to be able to process things. I get full of the word. It don't take much. I could take a teaspoon of word, one scripture, and I'm living on that junk for a week or two. I'm just built that way. Not that I don't get it every day. I do. But I'm saying this. Thank you so much, guys, for working on this subject. And you know me, I'm going to just coach it out. You better make it mandatory in the church that you get grief counseling. You better make it mandatory that you teach your children how to cry and how to express our emotions, because black men don't know how to do it because we haven't had time to do it. We had to suck it up. We had to suck up the snot bubble because we've been whooped. And then we got to try to overcome our social ideologies and expectations all at the same time. I'm not making excuses for the black man, but we don't know our emotions. Of course, I don't even hardly know mine, and I'm 50-something years old just learning stuff about myself. I feel like a 2-year-old kid sometimes. Grief, so deep, so deep. Thank you for letting me air. And, of course, the celebration of life. I went into a funeral, and the person that was doing the funeral told a lie about everything they said about the person that was dead.
Well, hold on. If you can hold that thought.
Yeah.
All right. So we have Coach Garrison online with us. We'll be right back after this sponsorship break. 106.9 FM on the radio dial. Just hold the.
Partial funding for this program is brought to you by Blessed Hands Car Wash and Detail Plus, 2016 Chestnut Street, Greenville. Vehicle inspections, U-Haul rentals, spick and span hand vehicle wash and detail. That's Blessed Hands. 252-413-0609. Open Monday through Saturday, 8 o'clock a.m. to 5 o'clock p.m. Blessed Hands Car Wash and Detail Plus, 2016 Chestnut Street, Greenville. 252-413-0609. Thank you, Blessed Hands Car Wash and Detail Plus, for your support.
Hi, my name is Minister Cooper. I listen to Awesome Radio every day, 106.9. Now you have a blessed day.
Surely in the family, God is with me. Surely in the family, God is with me. Surely in the family, God is with me.
Well, we're back on 106.9 FM on your radio dial. You listen to Real Talk for Real Men. All right, Coach Garrison, you were making a point.
Yes, sir. I believe, okay, let me finish my point about the celebration of life. I was at a funeral, and I knew the person that had passed away, and I knew that they hadn't exemplified good behavior in a lot of points in life. I believe that the person did the funeral just flat out just told mistruths, misspoke about every good thing they said about that person. But the person did do some good stuff. They just didn't pick the right things that they did good. Should we not celebrate that person's life? I think if we got the grief counseling right, if you marry me, Pastor, I'm now expecting going forward that pastors and all counselors or coaches follow up at least twice on a significant life event. So if they're going through grief counseling, they have lost a loved one, meet with them at least twice, once now and then follow up 6 months later, because they ain't doing good. I'm just going to tell you. You might need to meet with us if we buy a house. Hey, Vern, I see you're blessed. You bought that house on the corner lot. Man, I might be tore up in 6 months and lost control of all my finances, and scared to ask you for psychological and financial advice. So traumatic events of life, big transitions, getting married, losing a loved one, buying a house, winning the lottery. So, guys, I think that it ought to be embedded in the church. So I want to get back to when I said a little bit of scripture takes me a long way. A little bit of scripture takes me to the point that show me how it works. Show me how I'm a child of God, and sit down with me and spend time with me. And I can say, Pastor Trey, every time I called on him, he don't know how much I needed to just hear his voice he'll answer the phone, and I can tell he was busy. He said, "What's up, Vern?" He'll call me back. Those little moments that we spent lunch together took me a long way in a very complex mind. But gentlemen, men of valor, I'm gonna let you go. I just love to see practical application of the scripture.
Yes.
Don't come talk about me and sin when you ain't come and try to hold me up and prop me up when I'm trying to prop you up. Don't come talk about me and sin when you want me to pay tithes or want to make offerings. And that's my heart, love, blood, sweat, money. And you just all you gotta do is tell me I'm going to hell and you can't sit down with me.
Right.
I'm getting off track. I love y'all. God
Good
bless
coaching.
you.
Good
I'm
coaching.
gonna try to listen to the rest of the show, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. So we're looking at Vern was saying pretty much he was saying we should support each other through life. Just if you somebody go to your church and they lose a loved one, it probably wouldn't hurt to just have a calendar, just a grief calendar, and just maybe document what time this person lost somebody, that you could just kind of keep up with it. Because one thing, a lot of things that happen with us, even as men, particularly as men, sometimes we don't keep a good track of how we feel or acknowledge that things are going on in our life. So I'm quick to and aware to, my mom died in October. My dad died in September. So sometimes you in your mind, you don't know, but you might feel a little, a certain way between birthdays, death days, what their birthday was, how to handle when someone died, just different things that people used to do in your life. And let me just kind of cut to it. Like, say for instance, say you have somebody that love to do I have friends. Most of my friends are therapists. Like, I got a whole bunch of friends that are therapists. I'm fortunate that a lot of them are Christian therapists.
That's good.
So I have a friend that told me when my mom died, it was like, you're going to have to deal with a new normal. That's the hard part, because you're going to have that phantom pain that you lost someone that was so significant to you. And so, literally, I was walking down the street that particular day. I was walking outside of my neighborhood and I saw this particular person. And she said, what are some of the things your mom liked to do? And one of the things I did tell her, she loved to tend the garden. And she said, well, why don't you go and maybe plant some flowers? And I did that. So I start doing things I knew it's like I felt I was the memory of what my mom used to do was comforting. And knowing that I was doing it, then I thought about, my mom did a lot. My mom would go to the nursing home. She made sure she fed people. A lot of times people don't know where a lot of that come from in me. My mom would she'd buy food just to deliver it to people. And so some people don't know this, and this is no great righteousness deal, but probably every 2 weeks, my friend has a food bank. My friends have a food bank at Greater Judah Ministries. And so I go there and pick up probably about 10 boxes of food, and I distribute them every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks I do that. But that's something that my mom would do, something she would do on a regular. And a lot of people don't know that's tethered a lot to, that's how I celebrate the life of my mom. It's through doing things like that. There's different things that in the community that my grandmother Mamie, she was like that. She would help people and do different things. She loved children. She worked in the children's ministry at Philippi, and literally would take most of my coolest trips. I can even do it like this. Most of my coolest trips that I've been on was with my grandma Mamie as a child. Whenever she went to King's Dominion. She took kids to King's Dominion. I was there. We went to Atlanta one year during the time of the Olympics. So during that time, I went to Stone Mountain, and I also she took us to the Martin Luther King memorial place. I saw his robe where it got shot. It might have shifted now that we have the one in DC. But whenever she would go somewhere, whenever the church went somewhere, she also made sure the kids went somewhere educational. And so those are little things that are built into me that I've observed. So whenever I used to go to church trips and we would go to a long church trip, I would try to get the kids to go to, and when we went to DC, I wanted to take the kids to all the historical things that you could go there for free. I ain't gonna take up all the time, but that's one way that I celebrate loved ones. You know, if somebody love to fish, I go fishing. You might don't even know it. I might take you fishing on their birthday, just not never say it to you. But I want to add that into it. Elder, did you have anything you want to go ahead and add to this?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is good, and you hit a couple of points there. One of the things is what I said before, the people around you, and I wanted to use an application. I know what the scripture is saying, but I'm going to apply it to this because in Corinthians, where it's saying, no temptation has overtaken you, such as is common to man, but God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape that you may be able to bear it. I think within all of this, God makes a way for us to bear by the people he has around us to speak a certain word at a certain time that affects you, like the woman that you ran into or the person that drove me to Newburgh. You know what I'm saying? God kind of is in this. As a believer, we understand that. And even with people that are not, he places people around them to say things and to do things and bring those memories. The memories are what is important. You know what I'm saying? The person is gone. The funeral is the ceremony. The memories is what you have to go on with. And when you can bring those up and you remember the good things, that's why I think we need to separate the funeral from the person, because that's the ceremony and the eulogy is what it is. Speak well of the person. Even though they may have done the bad things, you speak the good things. You know what I'm saying? Because you have other people there. Right. But I think we've got to like separate all these things and don't kind of bungle them up, and understand that the memories that you have may be different from the memories somebody else has. You understand what I'm saying? But that's what kind of, when I think about my mom and I think about the things that we went through together and the things that we've, dealt with and how she was, and those memories are important.
Yes.
And I'm one of those people that, I ain't really crazy about that viewing thing. That's just me personally, because I like the memory to be of the person, so that's just a little quirk that I have, I mean, I'll do it, but I'm not really, I like to think about the person as I knew them, when they were living. So I think our grieving process, we just all deal with it and go through it. And you got to let people go through it the way they go through it before you start trying to tell them how to deal with it.
That is so true. And I think that we deal with grief so individually. And if people decide that they're not going to go to the funeral, I've seen where people didn't go to their mom's funeral or to a big love, somebody they love funeral, but it was because it was hard for them to accept this person is truly gone. And I know how that tapestry work in different people's lives, because sometimes we feel like we need to be there together, but sometimes you just got to give people space and let them space and grace.
Can I say one other thing before Pastor Lawson? The other thing is maybe sometimes a person needs to know that they need to grieve.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Pastor Lawson.
Were you through?
Hey, look, he said before you, so I'm a Molly McButter this one, just sit back and chill.
Yeah. I think there's one element associated with how we deal with grief. and that's the refocus. When I think about Michael Jordan when his father passed, he seemed to have gotten over it by refocusing. He won a championship, immediately after. But then later you see him leave basketball and go play baseball, and most people attribute that to the fact that that was his father's first love for him, that playing baseball. And so a lot of people say, well, that's the reason he went back to baseball, because of his father. So refocusing is a great tool for dealing with grief. You find something else to focus on. Now, have to be careful with that, because that could be unhealthy in some sense, because you refocus, and that means the grief is still embedded in there somewhere. But some people can do that. Whenever I deal with grief, and I go straight to the acceptance level, where I'm saying, okay, it's done. Then the refocus is the tool that helps me, to do that. I find something else to refocus on. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you gentlemen is, and there are times that I ask this question of the survivor of someone that passed on, especially if the person was a Christian. I'll ask the wife or the mother or the daughter, I'll ask them, is your grief or your sadness for the person that passed, or is it for yourself, because you no longer have them with you? That's an important question, particularly for somebody that have a loved one that knew the Lord, because when they answer that question, that tells me what direction I should go in, because I can tell them, you don't have to be sad for the person that passed. Like Elder Nat says, about his mother, they're in a better place, and you should have the confidence that they're in a better place. So don't be sad for them. You can be sad the fact that you're not going to have them with you, but now that's where you deal with your memories. You pull out your pictures. Some people tell you not to do that, but I think it's a good thing to go back, pull out pictures, and refresh those memories. And for a while anyway. I mean, eventually you probably need to refocus and do something different, but I think that's a good thing, because if your sadness is directed towards the fact that you're not going to have them with you, you're not worried about the person themselves, they're in a better place, then that kind of cuts your grief in half, so to speak. And now you can just focus on the fact that, hey, they're good. Okay. I don't have them, but I have their memories. And so that kind of gives you the ability to refocus, deal with it, and you can grieve for the fact that you don't have them with you. You can grieve for that as long as you like. But you want to make sure that the person is not grieving or worried about their loved one themselves, and that the sadness is associated with the fact that I just don't have them with me anymore.
One thing I was watching the movie. It was the deepest line I heard probably for that year. The movie said that what happened was this one particular woman had a lot of power, a lot of superpower. And come to find out through the whole, you're watching it and it's real odd. The whole movie is odd, but actually it was a net. No, it wasn't. It was one of those specials, little series of TV shows. And as you're watching it, you're like, this is kind of quirky and odd. But what happened was the woman had power that she could keep. She was trying to keep the memory of her husband alive. And so each time you saw different things, like a little TV show, she would do things like I Love Lucy in one episode and different little stuff. But at the very end, she was talking to the memory of her husband, not necessarily the husband, but the memory of her husband. And he asked her one question. He said, what is grief but love trying to persevere, trying to hold on? And I think a lot of times that's what grief is love trying to say that you're so important, I don't want to lose you. And so then it caused you to trigger to go through, people go through the 5 stages of grief. I don't want to lose your memory. I hold you dear. And sometimes that's the anger that you feel. That's when people start to bargain, God, I'll be a better person if you just please bring them back or let them live. Or then there's levels of depression. And, while people are on the route to acceptance. I think that sometimes some people feel all of that at one time. They have that jambalaya of confusion that hit them. People go through different things. But I think it's really good to process it, because even memorials, there was a mother, I know a particular person who just recently lost their brother, but in 1 month, they've lost a lot. I mean, they lost more than one person in one particular month. And so they said March is really a hard time for them. But I love the fact that they did they went and did a balloon release to celebrate that person. They had a barbecue on a particular day. You know what I'm saying? And they told the reason why they did it is in particular that way was their love, one of their children that they lost actually wanted to do that for their mother, and they did that right before they did it for the mother, the grandmama, and then here it is, they just passed. So a year later, they celebrated the things that she wanted to do for her grandmama, for her. And I thought that was so dear. And so, so mindful, and that they all enjoyed themselves on that particular day. Well, on that note, go ahead, Elder.
No, well, we about out. We got time?
Yeah, you got some time.
Yeah, no, I just I was looking at what the brothers were saying there. When we got to understand, we're gonna miss the person. We're gonna miss seeing the person, miss being with them. I think that's it's normal, and when we understand that part is normal, then we have to deal with it the way we deal with it, and then we've got to move on. And
we thank you, Elder. Pastor Mace said that it really hurts when you lose a loved one. You could go read the comments, and there's a lot of good things him and Vernon had added. But on that note, you listen to Real Talk for Real Men. God bless you. We discussed grief. We love you. Talk to you next week.